Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to Positive Talk, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, and I'm glad you're here. We've got a great show for you today, and it's a local guy, so I'm hopeful that his family, friends, clients, and readers, and folks that have been part of his reimagining life and continuing to move forward are listening in today. And but first, before I introduce Mr. Doug Wheeler, I need to talk to my friend Nathan real quick and say hello, Nathan.
Hey there, Kevin. Good to see you and
nice.
Hear you.
It's how do I sound?
Oh, you sound great, Kevin. Nice having your voice here on the air.
It is indeed, and I want to quit sucking up, dude. But I wanted to say thank you, and thank you, Nathan, for all that you do. This is our last show that we're going to be doing at noon on KKNW for a little while. We're taking a bit of a break, but if you are somebody that likes what we do and enjoys Positive Talk, there's a myriad of ways that you can still reach out to us. We're on YouTube at Positive Talk Radio. We're on all the platforms and all the podcast platforms, and we're now on Brushwood Media Network 5 days a week, and we're just all over the place. And sometimes you just run out of time to do everything. But I wanted to personally thank Nathan. I've been working with him for the last 4 years or so, including my time with Martha Norwalk. And hi, Martha. I hope you're doing well. And
I'll pass that along to her.
Well, I'm sure she's listening. She listens all the time. And but I've enjoyed my time here with you, and you are in the utmost professional, even if you are 6'6" or whatever you are.
I'm 5'18".
Well, I'm 5'8". At least I was. Now I'm a little bit less than that. But no, it's been great fun. And we have a guest today that I've been looking forward to talking to for a while. First of all, is there anything that you'd like to say before we go into our interview for today?
Not much to say. I mean, it's been a pleasure working with your show, and I'm always happy to come here and know that Kevin McDonald's going to be live, and we're going to have fantastic guests, and you really just know how to keep a conversation going. Don't really have to worry too much at all whenever you're doing a show, because you can just get it going and keep it going.
That's the rule. That's what I try and do. But, I've been doing this a while. I started with KKNW in 2003. So I figured I've done over 2,000 interviews on the air in various formats and various styles and stuff. And I really have enjoyed my time here. So, and this isn't necessarily the end. We're just going to take a little hiatus for a little bit.
And I'm looking forward to that day when I get a little email in my email inbox saying that Positive Talk Radio is back on the air.
Yes, indeed. Well, we are not going off the air. We're just kind of repackaging what we're doing, which is part of life and is part of the grand adventure that we all have. As a matter of fact, our guest today, he's a local man. He's got a practice on the East Side, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about him, the book that he's written, as well as his journey as he negotiates through life. His name is Doug Wheeler, and I'd like to bring Doug onto the show. Doug, it is such a pleasure to have someone local here. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good today, Kevin. We said the lighting, and Nathan informed me that I might want to turn my flashlight on my iPhone, but it doesn't seem to help. So I can say that I'm a little bit in the dark. There's not good lighting in my room, but my deeds aren't dark.
No.
My deeds are not dark.
That's right. And you are a remarkable young man. You've been a psychotherapist for 35 years. That's a whole career all by itself.
It's been a long journey.
and we're going to talk. I want to talk about your current practice
Sure.
and how it's evolved over time. But I just want to, and also the book that you've written, which is called Reimagining Jonah: A Flight to Freedom, and that came out in November. You may or may not have any numbers on it yet, but how's it doing? Any idea?
I think it's doing well. We've had good feedback, had some really good reviews. Um, from what I can find out, Amazon doesn't release the data on sales. It's usually
Correct.
up to about 90 days. And I don't even get it from the publisher. You can also buy the book from the publisher, but it's ended up in a lot of people's hands, and the feedback has been really, really positive. And I haven't paid anybody to give me 5 stars.
Well, good.
Yeah,
It's expensive. Can people?
that would get expensive.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you primarily about you. You had kind of a, and we all. I believe, and I'd love your opinion on this.
Mhm.
I believe, and I say in my opening that we all go through a period of time when we ask the question, why am I really here? And what am I really supposed to be doing? And what is the purpose of all of this stuff?
Mhm.
People tell me what it's all about, but I need to find out for myself what it's all about. And I think that you went through that period sometime in the teens, maybe in 16. Tell us about your journey about that.
Well, that's interesting, Kevin. It was when I was, let's say, between 15 and 18. Was a very, very challenging time for me for a host of reasons. Uh, as we all are trauma survivors, I'm a trauma survivor. And yeah, things fell apart for me, let's say my junior year in high school. And I hit a very dark slide and slid pretty deep down and was estranged from both of my parents and my brother for a period of time. I lived in a different city. I grew up in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, which I used to refer to as a small town in Kentucky. It's about 30 miles south, right on I-65 from Louisville, or they say Louisville. Um, yeah. And by the way, my mother grew up on the south side of Chicago, and she was a city girl. So um, we were, let's say, we were Yankees that came into the South. And so we were imported into the South in 1964. So I learned to say Louisville in school, but we were not allowed to pronounce that at the dinner table. So we were always corrected with, would you like to try that again? That's Louisville. So I can say them both. But, anyways, I lived in a different city than Elizabethtown. And I had a spiritual experience. There's different language for it. Back then, somebody told me that I'd been born again, and then I was a born again Christian. And I mean, I had a Jesus Christ experience that I really am still trying to understand all that happened to me at that time, but it drastically changed my life. And so I really did, in somewhat of a very swift period of time, I went from dark to light. And I was able to again feel hope. I had a lot of energy as a young kid, and I was very imaginative, and I was very optimistic. But yeah, those were 3 years of um, some loss, but a real darkness inside of me. So that began a journey that I've had some bottoms out or bottoming out during my, let's say, late adolescence and into early adulthood. Um, there's been some cycling that's going on in that. And I think that we need to normalize that for most of us, that if it's not a severe mental illness issue, which mine was not, um, but we cycle in and out we can cycle in and out of light and dark. And so what birthed the book that we'll be talking about is another bottom out for me in 2016. And this was the worst I'd ever been through. And we can talk about what that is. But anyways, that's kind of the nutshell of my childhood. But there's a lot of things that I'm not addressing that went on during that time.
I believe that, and really it's more of a knowing, is that our life is full of experiences and some of them are good, some of them are not good, but they're all designed to bring us forward to where we are today. If you look at it from a positive aspect, which I
Mhm.
have a tendency to do, because I do have a show called Positive Talk, right?
Yes, you do.
And
That's better than negative talk radio. I don't think that would go over well.
no, that's all on Fox News. I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Oh no, I invite you to say that. Please carry on.
and and so the idea that we experience all of life, and you had a spiritual experience when you were very young,
Mm-hmm.
and that helped you through some of the darkest periods and gave you some light and so forth. And it is something that we all grapple with,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends on how you look at it. I think will depend upon the success you have getting through it. Because if you believe that everything is there for a reason and that it is there to take you to where you were meant to be so that you can live the life that you want to live and can live, that it can be construed as, boy, that really sucked, but I learned something from it, rather than life is just terrible. Do you kind of agree with any of that?
Oh, I would say for the most part, I agree with all of that, Kevin. Now, the one thing as you're talking, the one thing that I'm thinking about is I think that in some ways that can go, and I'm not saying you're doing this, it can go too extreme, that you can always get something good out of what happens to you. And I think that at times that can minimize the impact of trauma. I wouldn't disagree that there are good things to get. For example, the death of my brother, and we can talk about that. Um, it was very difficult. The day I was aware, and it was during the early writing of my book, that I saw valuable things that came out of my brother's death. But I really had some significant cognitive dissonance around, does that mean, and this was just all kind of in my inner work, but I think this binary thinking can be very, very common. I felt quite ashamed of, how could I get something good out of such tragedy? So I had to really think that through and really process that. So I would agree with you that there are good things to get, but I sure wish, of course, that it never happened. And I know a lot of trauma in a lot of people's lives, and I want to believe that they would be able to have gotten where they needed to get without less suffering if it hadn't happened to them. But still, it does create resilience. I mean, I'm thinking about your authentic grit. You know, the first time we talked about doing this, I told you that I did some research on you, and I really like that acronym that you set up. I've got it actually pasted on the wall here just as something to remember. Authentic grit. G, and Kevin came up with this, and I really like it. G is for gratitude. R is for resilient. I is for indomitable spirit. And T is for tough. And I was reflecting on that this morning, and I thought, where I go this morning, not because I've had a bad day or a bad week, because I haven't, but tough stood out to me this morning, kind of in a meditative time that I have every morning. And I learned doing some men's ritual work when I did some work out in the desert with a group of guys. And the first thing that we were asked to embrace was, life is difficult. And in one sense, you could say at times life sucks, but life is hard. And I remember I didn't want to accept that as the first tenet coming into the work that we were doing. Life is hard, but the older I get, I'll be 65 in March. Life is difficult. And usually when I say that, somebody will say, yeah, but isn't it good? And my thought is, oh, I'm not saying it's not good, but it is really difficult and hard. Not at every moment, but yeah, I agree with your statement, and I love the authentic grit acronym.
Well, thank you. And that just came to me one day, and well, as often things do.
Yes, they do.
And it really is an important aspect. Now, to be fair, I have said in the past, and I've said on the show, that I had what I would call a bad country music song period, where I went through a bunch of stuff. My dad died, my dog died, my wife left, I lost my house. Everything changed for me. But for me, it was, and it's, while that was all happening, it was not pleasant, and I was in a very dark place.
Yes.
And but when you as I came out the other side of it, and then I drove a bus for 12 years and really stabilized my life. Things what I found is that things, as we continue on, they tend to balance out a little bit.
Okay,
And
that's well said.
even and I will tell you, every I've talked to Neil Donald Walsh, I've talked to Gary Zukav, I've talked to Dr. Michael Newton, I've talked to a bunch of authors, some really interesting and well read and well disciplined people, and they'll all tell you life is hard. This is a hard place. It's dense. There's a lot of negativity, hate, division, and fear. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that we have to negotiate through. And sometimes it's hard to negotiate through unless you have a team around you or somebody that can really support you. And I know that's what you're doing with your work as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And the 7-year stretch of, it's been 7 years. It was 7 years in December since my brother's death. And just for the audience to know, and I can speak about this now, my brother died by suicide. And
I'm sorry.
thank you. It took 2 years to even pronounce that word. I'm a therapist by trade, and I believe in processing grief, but I've also learned that some things are premature to even address. And so I went inward, and the only therapy, and I've done a lot of therapy throughout the years of where I'm on the couch or I'm on the chair. And the first year I saw a massage therapist that did acupuncture. And that's the only way I could attend to my grief was that I surrendered my body, if you will, to her every week, sometimes twice a week. Didn't say a word. We'd already been kind of working together for a while. And she said, I'll talk to my clients or patients if you would like to talk. And this was before my brother's death. And I said, I really like quietness. So do your work, do the acupuncture, do the work, she said to me, just to let you know, the kind of massage. It wasn't the kind that you maybe typically would get on this. This sounds a little maybe disrespectful, but I imagine some that it's more of a tickle and more of a soothe than it is a hard massage. She said to me after the first time, you'll be my pin cushion and my punching bag. So she stuck me with a lot of needles and she worked on me hard. But as I would lay on that table, I had no words for my grief. It's been proven those 9 stages or 8 stages of grief that one goes through, those were never set out. And I've spaced on the author. It's that seminal work she did. We all know Kubler-Ross.
Yes.
She never meant, if you do some research on that, she never meant those to be stages that you go through the first stage and then you go to wherever anger is in the lineup and whatever. She never meant those to be consecutive stages. She said in her work, you'll be all over the map. I mean, within 5 minutes, you could channel through 3 of these and not in order. But somehow, as we do, somebody packaged it up because to be honest, I think it sells better when you package things. And all of a sudden it's like, well, you go through stage 1 and then you go through stage 2. And I knew that was not the case. So I didn't put that on myself. My grief was just literally all over the place, but I'd lay on that table and do the inner work with no words. I couldn't speak of my brother's suicide except to the people that knew about it. I could barely talk about it to my family. If it had been for my wife, my 2 sons, I do not know where I would be. I had friends that helped me through that time as well. But my wife and my 2 sons, they gathered around me. I was broken. I was so broken. So suicide's a tough one. I remember speaking to my cousin. She said, I called her and told her about my brother's death. And she said, well, Doug, I lost my husband. And I knew this story. She's a little older than me. She said, I lost him. He was a Vietnam vet and he took his life back in maybe the 80s or I've forgotten when. And she said, you just became a lifetime member of a club that you never wanted to be a member of. And that she's not the first one that said that. I think that gets kind of passed on, like in the AA model, you pass these slogans on. That's a slogan. That's a statement of to have a family member or loved one or friend or whatever die by suicide. It's it's its own unique club. So, anyways, that was the second. I had some other tough challenges in my life between those early years I spoke of, but things fell apart for me on the day after Christmas in 2016 because that's when we got the news. And I'd been close to my brother for about 6 months trying to help him through that stage. And I'm still trying to make sense out of what happened to him. But it was terrifying. It was terrifying.
I'd like to take a moment, if I can, Doug, at this point, because
Sure.
I think it's really important. If you're feeling down, if you're feeling depressed, if you're a Vietnam veteran, if you are a veteran of one of the later wars, and you're feeling like you're lost, I want to give you a number, and I want you to write this number down. It's very easy. Or if you know somebody, 988 is the number. It is a national hotline for mental health and wellness, and you can call that number. And if somebody if you are in distress, you can call that number. And if you are a veteran, call 988 and then hit the number 1. What you will be contacted by is if you're a veteran, another veteran who's already been through the war, has already been through the things that you're going through now. And I got to tell you, I've had 2 suicides in my life. One I witnessed, and the other was my brother-in-law. And I tell you, it is life-changing for the people who are still here.
Yeah.
And it is not. So if you're feeling that, get the help that you need, because your life is important. Yes, it's hard here. Yes, you might think it's easier to go to the other side, but you've got a purpose here. You've got a reason for being here. So please, 988 is the number. Get the help that you need, or contact Doug Wheeler. And you can do that by going to dougwheelertherapy@gmail.com. And he can be a resource for you to help you perhaps through some of these things that you can get through, because I witnessed the suicide that I witnessed. His whole family was absolutely, completely devastated. And I don't think, because he and his wife were having problems, and she was having an affair, and all that, all the things that go on in life,
Sure.
that told him that his life was meaningless and worthless, and that he might as well go. And this was the 4th of July, and he might as well go out with a bang. And so he did. And it was something that he didn't until a moment after he passed. He did not realize how many people loved him and how many people cared. And I think that if he had gotten that message earlier, that he would not have done that. He would have sought help. But you know how difficult that is for the family and for other people. And you're still 7 years later are grappling with even the concept of what he would be thinking and how that came.
Well said, Kevin. Well said. Thank you.
So go to that number 988, and you can get the help that you need. And that's one of the things that we like to do here. But you are, and we're going to talk about your book in the second half of the show, because you really are a shining star. And I know that we've all had our ups and downs, but you are one of the ones that is continuing the journey, and you're working to make it better for yourself and the people around you. It says even in your bio, it says you're working to make better ways of helping others through your practice, your art. By the way, your art is beautiful. Go to his website, which is selfcitygod.com. And he's got artwork, he's got the book, and he also works to engage the world in a better way than he was able to yesterday, every day. And do you make it every day? No. That's why they call it life.
Yeah.
I think. So I really appreciate that you are the man that you are and doing what you're doing. And I really appreciate that. But now, Let's talk about Reimagining Jonah, The Flight to Freedom. What
Love
made
to.
you write the book?
Love to. Let's start with, and it starts in the introduction of the book. So in July of 2016, a dear friend of mine asked me to come and speak at his church on the East Side. As I spoke about that Christian conversion that I had at age 18, I had spent a lot of time in church, a lot of different churches. I was involved in a student ministry in college. So those were spaces that I knew very well, and my spiritual formation had occurred in those spaces. And in 2016, I was still attending church. I no longer attend church, and I'm fine to talk about that and even give some understanding of why that is. And there's many of us who have just left those organized spaces. And we kind of refer to ourselves as wanderers, right? But it's not a negative wandering. There's a freedom in the wandering, but you've been able to let go of all those constraints of what you're supposed to be and what you're not supposed to be and all of that. But anyways, my friend asked me to come and speak at his church, and I like to talk and I like to give those kind of presentations. And I was honored by the request. So I said, Scott, I'd love to do that. And then I realized after we clicked off that it had been a while since I read the Bible. I knew this church would honor the fact or would want me to speak from some scriptural text. I had no interest in the Bible at the time. And I had done a lot of years of a lot of study of the Bible. And so I thought, what am I going to speak on? I don't even have a topic, but I better come up with something because it's in 2 weeks. And just popped in my mind, kind of like you said, maybe the authentic grit popped in your mind. It popped in my mind. How about the book of Jonah? And I don't know why. Well, one of the reasons it was so short. I thought, well, I can study that one pretty quickly because I like to do a little background work. Anyways, I read the book and I couldn't stop reading it. I just could not put the story down. And I can't really totally explain. I couldn't explain it then. I could explain it some now, but don't need to. I was just so taken with this character, Jonah. I've come to find out, Kevin, that I was accessing the Jonah in myself. That's what was really happening. And so, and any good story will read you as much as you read it. And so the story was reading me as much as I was reading it, but I didn't know that. I spoke that morning at church. It was 2 services. A young woman on staff came up to me beforehand. She said 2 things. Number one is, my son's named Jonah, so I'm looking forward to you speaking because I love the name. And she said, I saw the title in the church bulletin. I saw the title of your message, and I can't imagine how you came up with that title. It was Jonah as Guide. Well, I can tell you, if you sat and listened to most people talk about Jonah, nobody refers to Jonah as a guide. They refer to him as somebody who is wayward, resistant, grumpy, negative, not even anxious, just a bad person who ran from God, disobeyed, all of that. So I felt this support for, and felt like, as I read the book in the Bible, I was reading that story, and I felt like, Jonah needs a defense lawyer. He needs a defense attorney. And I think I'm going to be that. So I just took on this kind of a chip on my shoulder, like I'm going to speak on his behalf. So I spoke that morning in very kind of a generalized way about Jonah is guiding us. And I didn't even fully understand what it was. But as I stayed with it, and I'm not a writer by trade. My wife is a true author. My 2 sons are writers. I like to talk. Would much prefer, if you want to get an email from me, I'd much prefer to leave you a voice recording. And those folks that are listening out there probably get tired of my voice recordings. But emails, you have to think about it. And I get into my perfectionism and I'm checking the spelling of things and whatever and all of that. So you can imagine what it was like for me to write a book. It took a while, but I could not shake this Jonah character. So Jonah, I befriended Jonah. Jonah became a client, like I was working with a client, a confidant, a friend. If you saw the book is set up with 9 chapters, and each chapter begins with Jonah, comma. So I addressed Jonah. The original title was called Emails to Jonah, because I tell people, I don't know if I can write a book. I don't even know if the book is really all that good, even though I do believe it really, really is. I've come to say, this is a good book. There's a lot of time put in. It's a very artistic book. It's more of a novella. It's a novel, but it's got prose in it. It's an interesting setup. I don't know if it fits any one genre, um, but I'm not a writer by trade. But I just needed to put it to words, and so Jonah and I grew together in the process. And I would get ahead of myself and get anxious, and I would keep saying to my family members, here's the publishing date. I got to get this submitted. And everybody, always the consensus was, you're rushing, just pull back. You're rushing things. And I think some of that was the anxiety of I'll never get it done. But I also think I was trying to rush my own grief process. And so the book helped me slow down because I was forced to write. And I will say to anybody out there, you are addressing folks that are in grief, possibly having suicidal ideation. And even just in a dark time, even if there's no suicidality going on. In my grief, writing the book became a project that I just needed, not unlike somebody who would do ceramic work or go out on their workbench and make furniture. I just needed something to work on. I guess to try to get my mind off of what was happening. But I actually, after my brother's suicide, I saw the suicidality in Jonah. And that's when it cinched for me. It was beyond a defense attorney. And that is, this individual, not unlike us, this individual needs advocacy and support, and he needs somebody to sit with him in his grief. So when somebody tells me about a hardship in their life, I might have used to ask, well, what are you learning from that? Or how are you handling that? It's not my question any longer. My question is, tell me more. Just tell me more. And I'll often say to people, take your time. I can tell people are so rushed. And therapy creates kind of this rush. We got an hour to do the work or a 50-minute hour. And so I've just learned over the years, because I've been doing it for so long. It's not rote for me. It's not a script that I read from, but it's actually just take your time. Take your time. And when I see people go into that space where they take their time, somebody's really intentionally listening. People are processing their grief and many times coming up with their own answers of how they're going to make it through it. And then I'll do some intervention work and I'll do some work with that. So I'm really shifting my practice. I only work with men. When I started out in Woodinville, I started out in Denver, Colorado, many, many moons ago when we lived there. I had a practice in Woodinville for close to 20 years. But I shifted about 10 years ago, no longer do couples work. Every once in a while, we'll have a family member or spouse maybe sit in, but I work with men. And my work is shifting to, I think I'm in the stage where, grief is the focus, because there's a lot to grieve. And it's a process that's very important because it's akin to development. The thought of development, personal transformational development, without attending to grief is a very incomplete picture. And so I get troubled, Kevin, when by the way, I'm not giving you any, can I just carry on here, or do you want me to stop and let you ask or clarify anything? Or you want me to just keep going?
I am I am mesmerized by what you're saying, but I would like to interject here.
Please. Please.
That for those of you who may not, now I grew up in the Lutheran church and I went to parochial school for 8 years and I went to the Sunday school for like, I have the most perfect attendance in the Sunday school years and stuff. So I know the story of Jonah, and basically the story of Jonah is that he gets swallowed by a whale and he spends 3 days in the belly of the whale, and then he has a deeply reflective time, and then he is spit up onto the beach by the whale 3 days later.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that is all a metaphor for something or another.
Yes.
And,
yeah.
But at the same, so that is the basic
Thank you.
story.
That helps to create that foundation. Thank you. I always assume, and it's not a good assumption, that people know the story, and I say I think I say in the introduction of my book, go read the original story. But yes, he is vomited out of the fish's mouth. And then I pick it up from there, and I have 9 chapters in my book. So I take the story of Jonah, I reformatted it, I reimagined it. When I was a young kid, I can remember the very day my mother asked me, I think I was 6 years old, and she said, "Who are you talking to?" And I said, "I'm talking to John Mark." And she said, "Who in the world is John Mark. And I said, oh, he's my imaginary friend. He flies around in an airplane. Now, what I mean, I'm not, I don't, I mean, getting on an airplane is fine, but I was not enthralled or with airplanes. But he flew around in my head, if you will, and I would talk to John Mark, and I had a relationship with him. And there was a time where, and I don't remember, but it just faded. But I remembered that probably 10 years ago, before I even started writing the book. So I imagined Jonah that way, and I just let my imagination roll. And if you read the intro to the book, I'm not a theologian by trade, even though I've studied theology and I care about, because it basically is spiritual and religious thinking, and I care about that as something foundational. I'm not a linguistic, but I'm not an expert in linguistics. I'm not a theologian. I have a PhD, but I don't really consider myself to be an orthodox scholar. I'm a psychotherapist, but I came at this letting my imagination just light up and go. And I say in the intro, none of this, I'm not claiming that I have any authority about this individual, but I feel like Jonah somehow broke into my reality and alongside of what I was going through. And so, as I said earlier, we grew together. And so that was the beginning of Jonah. There's a lot to say about how difficult it was to write a book. People were asking me, are you working on your second book? And my thought was, I'm still trying to recover from writing the first one.
Well, I'll tell you, writing, I've tried writing a book. I can't write. Okay. I can't say that I can't because it's not over yet. I might at one point in time. But the major thing is that it is a process. And I believe that in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, Jonah was brought to you because someone wanted a different imagining of that story, because I think it's been misinterpreted in many ways by a lot of folks. And
that's a great way to say it, Kevin.
So I think that's what you were doing, but sometimes it takes a while to recover from that process.
Oh yeah. And I say this in the book that I took this on early in the writing, that I was experiencing Jonah as person before prophet. And so what that gets to me is that before you speak about somebody's credential, and we as men often, I do it all the time. Hey, what do you do? What do you do for a living? There's nothing wrong with the question. But many times it kind of masks that possibly a discomfort around the intimacy of who are you and where do you come from? And so I'm trying to shift rather than saying, hey, Kevin, what do you do for a living? I care about work. I grew up with parents that came out of the Great Depression. And so it was really, really just infused into my genes and my DNA about work and having a work ethic. Anybody who knows me, I have a deep, deep appreciation for work. I love to see people, I don't care what they do. I watched somebody fix my sewer recently, and I love to watch the young man dig the hole. And I said to Jessen, how long have you been digging holes? And he goes, oh, Doug, I've dug so many of these. They dug 11 feet down to get a broken pipe. But to watch him dig that hole, because he was experienced, he knew how to shore up the walls. It was a beautiful thing to watch. I've always loved to watch people work. And so I don't know if anybody would have loved to watch me work as I was trying to write this book, because it was really a difficult process. I think there are people that are born to write. I think you still have to work against the resistance and all of those things. I was not born to write. This could be my last book. I don't know, and I'm not going to make any statements. I say that's to me. I'm saying I'm not going to make any pejorative statements. There are some things that I want to pick up, some themes that the book touches. It's a short book. It's a very creative, almost poetic work. And there's some fundamental things about politics. There's some fundamental things about the abuse of power. There's some fundamental things about this definition of what men are and what men are supposed to be and what women are supposed to be. It's got a Jungian twist to it. The Jungian mindset around male and female is not to say, well, men are this way and women are this way. What Jung did, and this is one of the things that split him from Freud, Jung addressed the archetypes of anima and animus. And anima is the feminine soul or energy. and animus is the male energy. And so what he said was, there's a sexuality. You and I are born and we're identified. Things are changing a lot in this space. And I'm trying to stay up with understanding what's happening within gender. But things are becoming much more fluid. And I won't speak to that because I'm not an authority in that space. But this idea of, I was a boy and I was to think like a boy and act like a boy and all of that. And what Jung said was, there's a contrasexuality. If your sexuality is predominantly male, there's a contrasexuality. Now, some of this doesn't play well in the environment we're in now. So Jung has to be translated now to be more applicable to what's going on. But there's a feminine energy within men, and that's the anima within a man. And there's masculine energy within a woman, and that's the animus within her. So I like to approach, and so I worked in, the reason I speak to that is I worked in some of those Jungian concepts to what was going on with Jonah. That Jonah had been prototyped to be the male of what male looked like in his tribe. And I just imagined that, and I used my own story and the things that had been placed upon me. My brother was much more of a typical male than I was. I was much more sensitive and more emotionally attuned. I don't know how that came to be. I was born with an illness and almost died. It was very close to my mother and grandmother. And it was tough because those two female, those are two very profound females in a young boy's life. And they really, really took me on. I was not close with my father. My father was a World War II vet. He was not emotionally available to anybody. He was a good man. Things changed for him in the last year of his life, and that was a spiritual conversion for our relationship. That's a whole nother topic. But back to my grandmother and my mother took to me and did not take to my brother. And I believe it was part of my brother's pain. I know it was. He didn't speak about it. I don't know how aware he was of it. I think there was a depression there throughout his life of feeling the rejection. I'm on the side of, I was chosen. And I get into that in Jonah because it's not always easy to be the chosen one. There can be a guilt and shame that comes. And also, Kevin, you would be able to apply this, I'm sure, to when you are a suicide survivor, which I am, meaning I had some suicidal ideation myself, but I survived my brother's suicide. But I've had that guilt complex, that survivor guilt complex of, how in the world have I made it? And my own brother, who came from the same womb, I mean, what's going on here? But my wife will sit me down at times and say, let's talk about the choices that Dick made. Let's talk about the opportunities that Dick had, that he could have gone a different direction with his life. My brother was a profound executive in the healthcare industry. I love this statement. His statement, the mantra among his teams, he worked for 5 or 6 different big players in the healthcare space. And he held some big positions. And his mantra was, go sell something. Go sell something.
I used to say that all the time.
Yeah, and I love it. I love that. He just go sell something. He would get right down to it. So back to my book, I work in some Jungian concepts. There's a lot there. What I envision in however much more working years that I have is to continue to serve men in their grief. I'm not sure how to continue to do that am I just going to continue to be a psychotherapist, or am I going to, this book has kind of opened me to some other parts of me, the artist in me, which has been very life-giving. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. You spoke of the beautiful artwork. None of that is original from me. I got a great story around that, but that'll take 5 minutes to tell. But that's a childhood friend that I discovered 3 years ago. And Beth and I reunited over Facebook, and I saw some of her artwork. She's probably listening in now. She's just a beautiful, beautiful soul.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, Beth. I told her, call in today because Kevin will want to hear your Southern accent. It's
425
Brother,
373-5527.
you would not be able to mimic how beautiful it is. She now lives in Atlanta. But anyways, she took on all the artwork. So we have 9 black and white sketches that she did that open it, one for each chapter of the 9 chapters. And then she did the artwork cover, which is unbelievable. It's right in front of me here. It's the most beautiful. I think it was oil. It took so long for it to dry before we could even get it to print. So it kind of slowed the process. I had so many things, Kevin, to slow the process down. And what I've taken from that is I've rushed my entire life. I really have rushed my life. And I'm trying to slow down, and I'm trying to trust. And I think you're a man that maybe has learned much more of this than I have, to trust that things are going to continue to materialize. Things are going to continue. Ways will open. Parker Palmer says, when way closes, way will open. When a door closes behind you, if you're spiritually attuned, you might be able to see a door open in front of you. And so I'm trying to deepen those practices in my own life.
Boy, Doug, I tell you, you have said a lot.
I know.
And a lot of it is very, very meaningful. And I want to just clarify a couple things in my own mind.
Please.
And one would be that I know that you were a born again Christian when you were a kid,
Mhm.
and then you went through and you learned about the Bible, and as I did,
Mhm.
came a point in my life when it became like there has to be more. I don't get enough fullness out of what this is. And I want to understand more about things like meditation and mindfulness and taking care of each other and doing, even though the Bible says that at times, they killed a lot of people too. So,
Yes, it did. Genocide is clearly in the Old Testament. And not only is it there, but it's actually, let's see, I'll tell you this. A friend of mine said recently, he said, wow, isn't the Bible so honest, especially in the Old Testament story? It's like, be it however God exists, that somehow God wanted, we'll just use God, somehow God wanted us to know that genocide was accepted and celebrated. And that's deeply problematic. So it's interesting when you begin to see the Bible as it's telling on itself. And that's what I began to see about Jonah. It's like there's something here. It's telling on itself about Jonah, because Jonah, the most problematic character, Kevin, in the story, and there's not many characters in the story. The most problematic character is the God in the story. And I set out to say, I can't deconstruct God. I don't even know really how to define God. I used to have clear definitions, but I'm going to work to deconstruct the God in the story. I'm going to set out. I mean, I do have the courage to do that. Whatever, I still have fear inside of me that was instilled inside of me in Christian circles about a God who will punish at some point if life is not being lived according to that God's terms. And, I've worked really hard to get that out of my system. So Jonah helped me do that because I advocated for Jonah in the face of a God who really mistreated Jonah. So what I do with the fish, and actually in Hebrew, it's a she-fish. Well, it's a female fish. And I named her she-fish. I'm very proud of that name. A friend of mine the other day asked me, how did you name her? And I said, it just dropped in my mind. I said, Allison, it just dropped in my mind. She-fish. She is the most representative divine character in my story. And I think in the original story, she swallows Jonah and then she rebirths him. And I do a little different thing that happens in her womb. So anyways, yeah, I could talk a lot about that, but that's my story.
Well, you need to go get the book, which is called Reimagining Jonah, Flight to Freedom. And the author is Doug Wheeler. Go to dougwheelertherapy@gmail.com and you can talk to him directly, or you can go to selfcitygod.com and find out all about him, his work, the art that he does, all of those things. It's really important. And I just wanted to say this real quick about the energy, because I think Jung had it exactly right. We all are energetic beings in a physical body. And I think the makeup of each person's energy is different. We have different, I've been told I have a lot of feminine energy, um, and also a lot of masculine energy, because you make me mad and the man comes out in me. But there are some folks that are much more of a male dominated energy personality,
Very true.
and some that are more female dominated personality. And so I think partially that's where this era that we're now in, of not understanding the male and female and who you are and who you really feel like inside. And I think there's a lot to be said about the energetic makeup of each individual. What do you think about that concept?
Oh, I think that's beautiful. And I think that when what you just presented allows for a different way to approach even gender. It's a way
Yeah.
without saying it's this way or that way, that binary thinking. It's saying there's these energetic sources within us about that inner life. Absolutely. I think you did a great job. You've done a great job of being able to condense uh, my bountiful mind and the things that I speak of. So you and I need to work together. I need to spit out there what I'm thinking about, and you need to say, I think I could condense that down into about 3 sentences. And I'm like, all right, Kevin, let's do that. Hey, I'd like to ask you, so would it be helpful for the listening audience to know anything more about the short sabbatical that you're taking?
Well, let me just explain. I am doing this. I'm a little bit older than you.
Okay.
I'm 66 now,
Right on.
and I have always wanted. I've always wanted to be able to go back. In 2003, let me just preface. In 2003, I did the show 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And I loved every moment of it. It was successful. People liked it. And I've always wanted to go back to being able to do that. To do it now on this format is very expensive, and I can't financially afford to do that. But I can go to a digital radio station, which is called Brushwood Media Network. And I have a show now that is Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And I get to talk to, like, you're going to be on the show in 2 weeks, by the way. You didn't know that.
I am.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
I'm, I'm
I'm
taking
good.
those and repurposing them to
Okay.
go on that network. And so you will be there. And I also do the podcast, and I do a bunch of other stuff, but I need to be able to make it financially feasible at this point in my
I'm with
career.
you.
I've spent a lot of money trying to do that, and I've got to focus.
I'm
And
with you.
and you said the most important word in my opinion in the English language, Doug, and you said trust. I trust in the decisions that are placed in front of me, that they're the right decisions to make if I feel good about them, and they come to me in the right way. And this has come to me in the right way, I believe. And so
That's good.
it's not a fallback, it's a continuation of the adventure of a lifetime. And that's what I
That's that's great, Kevin. I'm sure people are just really happy to know that you're not rolling things up. You're
no,
actually just, if I can cop the word, you're actually just reimagining, your work, your career, right?
that's exactly right. And the fact of the matter is, just like you, I can't quit. I'm not
Hmm.
allowed. I my parents were
Hmm.
also from the Depression,
Hmm.
and I'm not allowed to quit. And
Hmm.
I do 5 or 6 or 7 shows a week. People think
Right
I'm
on.
nuts,
Right
but
on.
I
Yeah,
love
my
every moment of it. I
my
love
father. Oh, go ahead. Go. Sorry.
well, no, I was just going to say, and I love talking to you. We've got about 30, 40 seconds left. So I want you to wrap it up
Hmm.
and to tell our audience anything that you'd like them to know.
Oh, I think what I'd like to say is that essentially my book, The Reimagining Jonah, is it's actually freeing Jonah from a story that he's been locked inside of. And so I think that we can easily get locked inside of a narrative of who we are and who we're not. And it takes hard work. I will quote the great John O'Donohue, the Celtic mystic poet that died unexpectedly a few years ago. He says about growth, it is difficult and slow to become new. And you know, those are hard words. They're true. And I think they're good words because then we can slow down. We're in such a rushed pace. Buy this, buy that, promises, all the things you can do. Go to this webinar, seminar, this convention. The reality is it's difficult and slow to become new. That's given me a lot of comfort and hope.
Exactly. And by the way, we've been talking with Doug Wheeler. I go to selfcitygod.com, get the book, Reimagining Jonah, A Flight to Freedom. And I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank Nathan and everybody at KKNW for supporting this work. And by the way, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got.